Hey there, welcome to Beyond the Park. My name is Adam Yaris, and we are so excited to dive into Season 1, Episode 2, Canvassing today. Now, this is an episode that fascinates me because this is the type of work I would hate doing. I hate going to door to door for things. I remember when I was a kid having to do that for like food, for sports and whatnot. I detest this. But this is where Leslie is going to come alive. Now, this episode starts off with a phenomenal cold open. It's the annual Pawnee Easter egg hunt, and Leslie is going and telling everybody how hard this year's is. Tom apparently has hidden the eggs in an incredible way. People have been looking for like 20 minutes and nobody's found one. Cut to Tom. Tom says, "Ooh, I didn't do that." This is awkward. So then they go back and we see all the kids looking around, and apparently there are no eggs hidden. This is my dream for an Easter egg hunt, by the way. I just love the concept of putting all of these things out there and having nobody find them because none were actually hidden. I think this is hilarious. But then we dive into the main part of today's episode, and it's this concept that we are going to go door to door canvassing the town to get them to support this park. So the cold open finishes up and we see Leslie going to meet her mom. And this is a pretty exciting moment because we're getting to see the maker of Leslie. And Leslie, to be fair, has some crazy descriptions about her mom. Check this out with us. Leslie says her mom is as respected as Mother Teresa, as powerful as Stalin, and as beautiful as Margaret Thatcher. Now, as somebody that's interested in Margaret Thatcher and all the things that she stood for, I gotta tell you, she was not much of a looker. So Leslie, questionable taste to say the least. But Leslie goes on and explains her subcommittee to her mom and even invites her to the meeting. Now, mom is not that impressed and is uncertain if she's even gonna make it. Leslie is undeterred. So she says, we're gonna go to the town and make sure we stir up some support for it. So the groups head out. It is Leslie and Ann, and then Mark, April, and Tom going together. Now, both groups divest out here very quickly, and we find Mark, April, and Tom not doing so great. In fact, it goes so poorly that Tom quickly abandons his group and goes off making calls to contractors and trying to get community support in a completely different way. Leslie and Ann, on the other hand, have some limited success as they begin going. They go and start talking to everybody, and they also find out that some of the townspeople just don't like the park. In fact, they get into a fight with a lady who is going to come to the meeting the next day out of pure spite to just say no to all the things going on. Things are not looking good for this upcoming park. So we go back and the next day arrives and the subcommittee meeting is happening. It is a beautiful night and Leslie goes out and starts getting ready. She sees a room packed to the brim with people wanting to know what's happening. Now, they also make sure that April is planted in the audience so she could be a favorable contestant. That's going to come back to haunt them here in just a few minutes. Now, Ron in the background of all of this is getting pressure from Paul, that's the city manager, to build this park. Now remember, Ron does not want parks built among any reason. He's a libertarian and wants to shut down the government. Paul, on the other side, wants everything built because they are getting a lot of federal money in to build these parks. So this meeting has a lot riding on it. Leslie needs to thrive, and even Ron wants her to succeed so he looks good in front of his boss. It's a big deal. So the meeting starts up, and right as we begin, we take some testimony from Andy saying, hey, how did this whole even come to be? Well, Andy gives his description, but one of his neighbors gets up, not because he cares about the park at all, but because he hates Andy and starts verbally abusing him. Things are going downhill quickly. The town is rallying against Leslie, and even April is found out as a spy from the crowd. They note and say they have planted people in the audience to bring us down. They are beginning to hit a lot of issues here. So Leslie comes in, starts drinking Gatorade, and does the only thing she could. She decides to filibuster her own meeting. So she goes on, starts talking about everything going on in the town, and even starts reading from the book The Phantom Toll Booth to get their attention away. Eventually, the townspeople demand to be heard though, and Leslie keeps them going until the meeting clocks out and she survives. Granted, it's ugly, but even her mom gives a little bit of a nodding approval at the end. Last scene of the show, of course, comes back to Tom holding the Phantom Toll Booth, and he's like, Leslie's right, this book is amazing. And that's how Season 1, Episode 2, Canvassing ends, in a bit of like this ambiguous state. But this episode has a lot of juicy nuggets for us here. Now let's take a moment to talk about a best line of the show right here. The best line from this show today comes from Leslie and Ann canvassing with a local townsperson. Now this local townsperson is adamant she does not want to park. She admits it's kind of weird, that it's a little unusual, but it's just something she's not interested in. Well, Leslie has some feisty words to say about that. Leslie says to this unique townsperson that you don't care about your kids if you don't support this park. Brutal. Now, I gotta be fair, I worked with kids and youth for most of my life at this point, and I kind of thought that parents sometimes don't care about their kids. But this is pretty unusual right here. You're telling a parent to their face. Now, I've wanted to say it, we all have, that hey, maybe you're not doing a great job as a parent, but that's brutal. Telling a parent you don't care about your kids if you don't support this park. Key question is, do you actually care about your kids if you don't? I don't know. I would. Who knows? It's a great question, but I guess if you don't like parks, it's okay. But now let's move on to some quick observations in today's episode. Some things that stood out for us. Our first quick observation is starting to see Tom Haverford's confidence. Now, out of any TV show, I think Tom ranks up there with some of the most confident, powerful individuals who's just willing to say anything to get his own way. While everybody else is out canvassing, he is calling contractors to try to get them to support this effort by promising that they are going to be the ones getting all the business. And in the middle of these calls, people are asking, hey, do I even know you? While Tom's calling in these favors, which the people clearly don't own them. Tom is a confidence machine. And we're going to see that throughout this series because that confidence is both going to build Tom up and it's going to destroy Tom throughout the series. Second quick observation is Ron and his continued libertarianism. Now this is throughout the whole series, but we're getting a great taste of it right here, that Ron is adamant. He does not want this park built because he doesn't believe the government should even exist. Well, that's for our quick observations. But now as we've dived into the basics of this episode, I want us to take a moment here to go beyond the park, to dive a little deeper into some meaning in this episode. Let's check it out. What's the best you could do? You know, that's a big question we probably ask ourselves, or somebody around us has always asked. I remember my parents used to joke with me if I got like 100 on a test and would say, hey Adam, couldn't you do any better than that? What's the best you could do? This is a question Leslie is facing constantly throughout this series, and in particular from her mom here. Leslie wants to achieve more. She just wants to be known as somebody that gets things done. And that's why she wants to fix this park, because she doesn't think that this pit, which she believes will one day be a park, is the best that Pawnee could do. Check it out. In the episode, Leslie says this: why do I want to build this park so bad? Maybe because a pit filled with garbage isn't the best that we can do in America. You know, in Russia, they could pretend that pit was a park, bring their kids down here. Hey Vlad, look at these rocks. Let's pretend they're potatoes. Nikolai, do you want to swim in the dirt? But not here, okay? We're a nation of dreamers, and it is my dream to build a park that I one day visit with my White House staff on my birthday, and they say, President Nope, this park is awesome. Now we understand why you are the first female president in the United States. Leslie wants to build this park. She's living in a world where people are constantly putting her down, and I get it. Sometimes it's fun to put down dreamers and optimists, but the reality is we need them more than ever. The tough thing for Leslie is that even her mom doesn't really support her. Her mom kind of is a powerful figure. She's a self-made woman and she survived some tough circumstances. But her mom doesn't always seem like she believes in Leslie. In fact, sometimes the mom cuts Leslie down. In fact, during one of the big parts of the episode, the mom gets her own little talking head and she says this: I want my daughter to be successful, which is why I always tell her there's nothing wrong with being a wife and mother. Now, being a wife and mother is incredible. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But we know what the mom's trying to do to Leslie. She's trying to destroy her confidence. She's diving again and again and wondering, what is the best you can actually do? So what's our best? And this is where we go beyond the park today. You know, I think we all struggle with wanting to do our best. I do. I want to do the best I can at work, the best I can when I was in school, the best I can with my wife. I want to do the best everywhere. But what's the real best that we can do? It's a question that pops up again and again. It's something that Leslie's going to struggle with throughout this series because she can never go less than 100%. We all want to know that we did the best. We all want to know that we've tried. The challenge is, sooner or later, and usually much sooner, we find out we haven't done our best. And this makes me remember a story of a guy named Moses in the Bible. Now, Moses was a guy that always wanted to do his best, but he had a bunch of terrible things happen to him. He was kind of adopted as a child by his enemy's family. He ended up killing a person and running away for years. He was exiled away from his family, living in the desert, even though he was a city boy. And then one day when he was doing his job as a shepherd, a bush was on fire and it wasn't burning up, and that's kind of weird in and of itself. He's got to be wondering, like, did I get heat stroke out here or what? But Moses goes over and takes a look at it, and he has a conversation with God. Now, if that was me, I'd be panicking like right here, like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to God. I've got to ask the top 5 questions, like, why did the ending of Lost not turn out so great? I'd be asking all the questions. But Moses goes over and says, I'm so uncertain about so many of these things. You're calling me for this big mission, God. What are you calling me to do? And God gives him all these ideas, these expectations. And Moses is wondering, I don't know if I could give my best. I don't know if this is me. So he asks God, what's a sign that this is what I'm supposed to do? And God tells him his name and say, hey, if anybody doubts you, tell him I know who God is. And God says, my name is I am who am. That basic phrasing here means that God is the center of everything that Moses would be. That God was enough. That God was the best that Moses could do. That all of his goals and hopes and dreams were there because God had created him to do that. See, God was the wholeness that Moses was looking for. He was the absolute best. Because only when Moses realized that his best wasn't enough, but that God could be his best, did things change for Moses. Moses went from a disgraced person living in the desert to leading a nation to freedom. See, Moses found out what his best was, and it was all that God had created him to be. And that takes us beyond the park today. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you could help us out by liking, commenting, and subscribing, that would be fantastic. We can't wait for our next episode. It'll be Season 1, Episode 3, The Reporter. We'll see you